Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and perhaps other things too that are watching this series. Welcome back to Paper Mario. Also, I'm really curious how that worked. Not that the log popped out and just, split in two and everything, but how it got lodged in there in the first place. Are we to imagine that perhaps somebody put it there deliberately? Yes, in a meta view we could say it's the game developers, but someone in-game? Well, that raises a serious number of questions. This jungle is certainly strange, but a lot of things can be explained as natural. Such as, some of the enemies that happen to be around, or, some of the plants that you poke and then they honk at you, or they try to eat you. That's a very natural thing for a plant to do. But I don't think I've ever seen a log bounce up from, oblivion, and then just make a bridge by slicing itself in half. Step one is that somebody had to put the log there and then cause it, to be lodged however many feet deep it was. I didn't exactly have bring a ruler with me. But the other conundrum, the thing that I'm most curious about is, the physics as well. How does... Perhaps we need to look more into the secrets of this island. That might be something to consider. It's no strange fact that this island has some sort of, ancient culture embedded in it. We've seen statues, and certainly there are other people who've lived here before. I can cite other places in the real world, like the Pacific Islands, which tribal men managed to reach. I suppose the same can be said for this place? And it's no strange thing to say that Yoshis naturally are, ancient in themselves. They're dinosaurs. Which means that they must have gone through perhaps millions of years without any slight hint of evolution. Except perhaps for their intellects, of course, but even that's debatable. Debatable in that we're not sure whether or not they were always smart, or they were always, just doofy, and that allowed them to not really innovate much with their lives. Admittedly, as adorable as they are, you don't see that much innovation going on with this particular culture. It is sort of a hop around, eat eggs, life cycle continues. That being said, these people have picked up on certain aspects of other cultures. That's not to say they haven't, been a part of other cultures as we've gone along. We're playing hide and seek, and I'm not entirely sure which group of people invented that, or if it was invented by any particular one group at all. I've heard of multiple cultures embracing and joyfully playing the game of hide and seek. So it's not really a matter of which culture can lay claim to a certain tradition of, recreational activity like that. For all we know in the Mario world, it could have very well started on this island. It could be a very old tradition. Or, possibly, maybe the Yoshis didn't originate here and migrated from, perhaps, the mainland or a larger island in which those games were widely played or perhaps started. I'm pretty sure that in some cultures in the real world, hide and seek has some, it has... how to word it? It stems from, certain ongoings of the time, like perhaps... Sort of like how Ring Around the Rosie is actually a really dark game about, death. Hide and Seek could have been made about the politics of the time, or perhaps the religions of the time, so... Really, it's hard to tell. Oh, here's another log that we can analyze. That one was quite a bit, I think it was a bit taller than the previous one that we saw a moment ago. Nah, actually it looks about the same size now that I'm looking at it. But yeah, to the point. The point is that it's possible that it may have been adopted from a different culture if they've moved from another island to this one where they currently stay. But that migration must have happened a long time ago, because we're looking at, potentially the society that's lived here since ancient times. So, again, that brings us to the question of the purpose of the logs and how they got there. Okay, now bear with me for a moment, because I'm gonna take a wild and crazy guess. But perhaps the ancient world of the Yoshis of this particular island, they may have sought fit to have some form of engineering work, or, you know, construction, perhaps. Maybe it was appointed by their then chief, or perhaps it was more of a, like, commission for hire sort of thing, where they did it on their own accord rather than being assigned to the role. Either way, that is what caused the log profession, the put log in a hole and make it bounce up job. And I'm certain that that job was possibly coveted. It depends on whether or not it was a job that was really, you know, valued by the society of the then time. But the fact of the matter is that I seem to be getting a little bit off topic. Once again, the logs. Either way, somebody had to have the know-how to take a log, or perhaps, you know, if you want to take it a step further, start with a tree, cut it down to its bare minimal part, that is to say, make it into a perfect cylinder, and then bury it deep underground, and design it in a way so that it would split open completely perfectly. So I suppose they'd have to have some sort of hinge system, or maybe it was already split and then opened up on its own accord, and then land perfectly with the body of land across the water that you're trying to reach. So, in one sense, that's actually a fantastic engineering feat that makes you wonder if that sort of engineering was capable back whenever it is the Yoshis put it there, which has to have been at least a couple centuries back, because I don't see them doing any of this sort of stuff now. So the question is, where did that engineering prowess go since? I mean, we saw a single house over by the village itself, but that's more or less it. There was a treehouse, yes, but that was certainly done by the birds of the place. Oh dear. But anyway, looks like we have to deal with a quick fight. That's alright. 2 piranha plants. A putrid piranha. Yet another variant of the piranha species. Huh. You know, actually, it just occurred to me that the piranha plants have a very ancient appearance in and of themselves. One could say that they're also quite an old species, similar to the Yoshis are, because of their behavior. That's not to say that these creatures are on par with the Yoshis. I don't believe they're anywhere near as smart. But they certainly look like ancient creatures, like the sort of creatures you'd find in, you know, dinosaur-era times. So perhaps, you know, Cretaceous or Triassic or something of that nature, and they stopped evolving since, except, again, for their intellects. And we have seen piranha plants pretty much all over the globe, like back at home and Forever Forest, and there are some that have migrated all the way over to the icy regions of this world. So, based on their appearance and their behavior, I'm thinking that they probably grew up in a, you know, more of a warmer sort of swamp environment, which again sort of fits that Triassic, Cretaceous, somewhere around their era. Of course, listen to me generalizing about the ancient biological world. But the general idea that I'm trying to get across is that these are also ancient peoples, and perhaps a bit more ambitiously so than the Yoshis, who have chosen to live in climate areas and islands, whereas these folks have pretty much appeared everywhere around the world. And that's quite a feat, considering they don't have, well, feet. Granted, these we noticed earlier were actually walking around, and it's true they can bury themselves in the ground, but if you think about it, they're completely free from the ground itself. They're not reliant on roots or anything. They were clearly walking on their own accord. So these are actually a highly advanced version of Piranha Plant, which is amazing if you think about it. But yeah, it looks like these Piranha Plants are no more, and they will be dead, so years of evolution all for naught. Anyway, I think this is number 3, or perhaps 4. Admittedly, I haven't been paying that much attention. But, you know, that brings me back to the logs and the engineering feats of the Yoshis. I mean, we have to admit, unfortunately, that nowadays in this current modern-day world, we don't really particularly know the Yoshis as being particularly innovative or having a lot of, you know, contributions to an engineering or a scientific world. I suppose one could run tests, of course, but generally that's not what they're known for. So, the question then remains, were they a more engineering society back in the time, and then perhaps lost their way, or is it something they've just lost their priority in? Perhaps certain lessons weren't taught, sort of how, like, nowadays in our own world, teachings of old classic era marvels are completely lost on us, like the ancient pyramids, or, you know, the Library of Alexandria in long days past. Could that mean that perhaps these these ancient peoples perhaps once had a great reverence and understanding of technology, and oh look, another example. You know, the ability to do that. Actually, if you look at that, that's a lot of wonderful craftsmanship, because there's absolutely no evidence to say that that log was even in the ground in the first place. It just sort of popped up and the grass immediately sprouted back. And furthermore, that log had to be there by some sort of spring-loaded mechanism, because it popped out of the ground, like literally jumped. So there's no doubt in my mind that these creatures, that these Yoshis, rather, as I will call them by their correct names, weren't completely capable of doing that sort of thing. But look at the society of today. There isn't even a house for this building, it's literally just out in the open air. I mean, it will still accommodate, but, you know, the bed is made out of logs, and the table is made out of, you know, rocks. It really doesn't speak much for their ability to, or their apathy. I mean, it speaks much for their apathy to not really care too much about buildings. I mean, I suspect the only reason this particular building has any sort of roof or walls at all is because they need to protect their merchandise. And while I will admire that, it's not completely out of the question to say that somebody else built it for them, or something like that. I mean, I suppose if they really wanted to, they could have dug a little tunnel underground, but I'm not entirely sure how well that would have worked for them. If we look at the culture of today of the Yoshis on Lava Island, and perhaps all of the, you know, Yoshi Islands in this grand archipelago at the southern area of the Mushroom Kingdom, they don't really have anything in the way of schools or colleges or universities. The only, I mean, the parents of this island didn't really particularly care too much for them at all. That's why they left them in the care of a fish. And that fish is following us now, so once we help these kids, they're not going to have anywhere to go. Then they'll have no form of, you know, formal training or education. I mean, the parents said that they were busy, but they're not helping the search at all. In fact, they're just flailing about in their own village while this stuff happens. And it leads me to believe that perhaps the parents just don't care, because they're certainly not busy. I can't think of any possible thing they could be doing, quite frankly. It's like that thing where people say they're busy, but they just sort of walk around town and don't contribute to whatever it is their society, whatever society it is they want them to do. Again, that may not be a bad thing, because this sort of culture embraces the sort of eat and lay eggs, and that's really all I can think of. And while they do help quite often in the adventures that we currently undertake, it's just worthwhile noting that on the grand scale of things, they don't contribute too much. At least the progress of society as a whole. And I think they're doing it intentionally, because they're not putting that much effort into their children's future. Really, I think at this point it might be fair to suggest that we try to reawaken their engineering feats of old, and perhaps, you know, maybe introduce some sort of educational system. Of course that means, hey, we did a thing! I guess that means that we have to, maybe once we rescue Peach, we'll bring it up in, Parliament with her. Actually, I don't believe there's a Parliament in this kingdom, it's pretty much a monarchy. We could totally do it. I mean, Mario more or less has Peach wrapped around his finger. Granted, I'm not really sure how much authority or, you know, power Mario really wields other than the ability to retrieve cakes from his beloved princess, Maiden Fair. But yeah, if we could totally start that sort of thing up again, I suppose we could reawaken classical teachings of old, and... Sushi, what are you doing? And we could possibly, you know, further the progress of the Yoshis, you know, get them actual houses in the neighborhoods. Oh, well, it seems we are going to be given a thing for rescuing their children, so perhaps they care a little bit. I don't think they care enough, but they care a little bit. So it may not be too difficult to convince them to continue caring for their children. Apparently, I don't think it's the smartest option at this point, but it's something we wish to do. Sir? I should mention this is a post-commentary, so I don't remember why I paused like this. Okay, there we go. Oh? You're rather chuffy, aren't you? It didn't really strike me about how chuffy you are, but... That's unusual, considering the Yoshis have a really high metabolism. That's something in... Oh, hey! A Jade Raven. Actually, I wonder if we should give this to our archaeologist friend. I mean, it may not look like much at first, but it's actually quite an interesting little specimen. And it may pave way into learning a bit more about their ancient, traditions. In fact, we've seen the ravens a few times, and obviously there's one right there in the, Central Plaza. What do you mean you haven't seen one since you were a young one? There's a tree of them right in the town plaza. All you have to do is jump on the spring. Although I'm not entirely sure if you're capable of doing that. Of jumping, that is. You look like you haven't done that much physical activity in a while. Ugh, you have no idea. Don't even get me started on my thoughts towards this island and my adventures. Why indeed? That's a pretty... Yeah, that's a pretty natural reaction to being told you're going into a volcano. Yeah, neither do I, but apparently we have to, and there's no other way around it. Some bad guys. It's like Mario doesn't even know who took her. It's like, oh... Who kidnapped the princess for the 1,000th time? I don't know, some guys. You know, they're people they jump on and all that stuff. We do need you, actually. We need you more than you need us. In fact, it would make sense for you to stay here, because you're the one thing that's helping these children out, and you seem to care a bit more than they do. But I suppose if the world's at risk, it makes sense for you to join us for the greater good. But once this whole adventure's over, Sushi, you better tend to these children's needs and, you know, help them progress a bit better. Be their tutor. So my ending thesis is that there is cheese.